What if one of the world's smallest nations keeps choosing the one strip of land every empire must cross and still refuses to disappear? That is the tension at the heart of Jewish history, a people tied to the land of Israel, pulled by covenant, battered by armies, and driven by a fierce bond with the Jewish God, who is not a king's mascot, but a judge above kings. The Israelites return from Egypt under Joshua, stepping into Canaan not as tourists, but as claimants to an old promise. The land is dangerous from the start, a narrow corridor where empires march, collide, and crush whoever stands in the way. And yet this is the place they choose to build, lose, and rebuild again. Joshua moved fast because hesitation would be fatal. The Canaanites have war chariots, walls, and fortified cities, but they are divided into loose city-states, and Joshua understands that a fragmented enemy must be hit before it can breathe as one body. He crosses the Jordan, strikes south against the Jebusite alliance, then wheels north against the forces led by the king of Hazor. In the biblical account, the destruction that follows is harsh, and modern readers should know that some details belong to ancient narrative and debated interpretation, not to neat modern certainty. But the text point is clear. The Israelites see themselves as uprooting a religious world they regard as corrupt, marked by Moloch, Baal, and Asherah. And here is the deeper twist. This is not just an invasion story. It is also a return story. Israelites coming out of Egypt reunite in the land of Israel with related Hebrews who had never left centuries earlier. Descendants linked to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And that fusion takes nearly 200 years and never fully loses its internal tension. So ask yourself, what is harder, conquering a land or becoming one people inside it? Because the second battle will last far longer than the first. Once settled, the Jews stop being nomads, and something unusual appears in history: the era of the judges, the Shoftim. These leaders are understood not as divine kings, but as men and women answerable to the Jewish God, with authority in war and peace, yet limited by law and balanced by tribal elders and assemblies. For about 2 centuries, this system works, at least enough to hold society together. It has a rough, early federal structure, and the source even presents it as a kind of proto-democratic model. Though claims that it was the first democracy or a blueprint for later constitutions are better treated as interpretive arguments rather than settled fact. There is also a cultural revolution unfolding. In this period, according to the source, important literary and linguistic developments emerge in the region, including claims about the alphabet and the shaping of Hebrew poetic tradition. Though here, too, some of those conclusions remain debated among scholars. But the real weakness is political. The judges' system has no durable executive center. Each tribe trusts that in a crisis, the Jewish God will raise up a deliverer like Deborah and save the day again. It is inspiring theology and unstable statecraft. Then life changes. A people used to tents, flocks, and movement now lives in towns, farms, and permanent boundaries. The old structure begins to creak. The social world is changing faster than the political world can keep up. Wait, it gets more dangerous. A nation can survive without luxury, but not without coordination. And that is exactly where the next gamble begins. Around 1000 BC, the tribes answer the crisis by creating a constitutional monarchy. This matters because in Jewish thought, the king is not a god, not a son of God, and not the owner of the people. He is under law, morally accountable, and exposed to judgment like everyone else. That idea alone changes the political temperature of the ancient world. Saul is the first anointed king in name, but David becomes the first true king in power. David is a warrior, yes, but his deepest ambition is not merely conquest. He wants permanence. He wants a center that can outlive the battlefield. So David makes Jerusalem the political capital, links it to the future temple, and brings the ark there, turning the city into symbol, memory, and sacred gravity. Yet because he is a man of war, the temple itself is left for his son. David dies, leaving something that feels like an empire to his people, stretching from the Euphrates to the Gulf of Aqaba. But it is less solid than it looks. It has been built through war, over hostile neighbors who are beaten, not erased, and the moment he is gone, rebellion rises along the edges. Solomon sees the weakness and chooses a different path. He is not driven by his father's battlefield instinct. He wants order, wealth, industry, and peace. Instead of retaking every lost territory, he turns inward to build a state that can function like a machine. He centralizes power, cuts across tribal lines with taxable districts, imposes labor, and pushes the country from an agricultural society toward an urban and commercial one. But he moves too fast, and that is often how brilliant rulers create the disasters they never meant to unleash. Cities rise, trade grows, industry expands, but so do unemployment, forced labor, landlessness, corruption, and the social divide between rich and poor. The economy becomes a house of cards in a windstorm, and resentment starts to hum beneath the marble. Then religion enters the fracture line. Solomon allows the foreign worship practices of his many wives and companions, and what he likely sees as tolerance, many in the kingdom see as betrayal. For a people bound to the Jewish God by covenant, pluralism at the top feels less like openness and more like spiritual surrender. Here is the uncomfortable question. How many kingdoms collapse because of enemies outside, and how many collapse because success makes them forget who they are? The kingdom was always more fragile than it seemed, a dual structure with Israel in the north and Judah in the south. When Solomon dies in 931 BC, his son Rehoboam inherits not a stable throne, but a political minefield. At Shechem, the elders ask for relief from burdens and grievances. Rehoboam, vain and rigid, does what insecure rulers always do. He mistakes stubbornness for strength. Instead of conciliation, he chooses insolence, and in doing so, he shatters the kingdom almost overnight. Jeroboam, a capable northern leader back from exile in Egypt, becomes king of Israel, while Rehoboam remains ruler of Judah. Within a year of Solomon's death, the united monarchy is gone, and a civil war between Israel and Judah burns for a century. This is where Jewish history changes mask. The old image of a wandering people gives way to something harder, sharper, and more militant. The source emphasizes that the Jews now repeatedly fight for political survival and religious liberty against powers far larger than themselves. Israel's throne becomes a revolving door of dynasties, intrigue, assassinations, and short-lived kings. Jeroboam deepens the split by building a rival sanctuary at Bethel, turning political separation into religious competition. Then comes Omri in 866 BC, one of those rulers who arrives like a storm and leaves a new map behind. He crushes internal strife, defeats enemies, moves the capital to Samaria, reforms law, encourages trade, and expands the kingdom so effectively that foreign powers know Israel as the land of Omri. But Omri plants a time bomb by marrying his son Ahab to Jezebel, the Sidonian princess, whose hunger for power and imported cults turns the court into a pressure cooker. In the source, her portrait is severe and hostile, but the core narrative point is that her policies become a symbol of royal overreach and pagan intrusion. Ahab is more complicated. Domestically, he is overshadowed, but in foreign affairs, he is shrewd. He understands that Assyria is the real threat and builds Western peace while preparing for Eastern war. In 854 BC at Karkar, Ahab helps organize a coalition of 12 buffer states against Assyria. More than 20,000 die, and the source presents the result as a stunning check on Assyrian expansion, delaying its timetable by a century. Then Ahab dies, and the pent-up fury explodes. Elisha backs Jehu, a ruthless general with both ambition and ideological fire. Jehu wipes out Jezebel, destroys Ahab's house, extirpates Baal worship, and then governs with administrative force, bringing decades of peace and prosperity. But history never stays quiet for long. On the horizon appears Tiglath-Pileser III of Assyria, a ruler of blood, thunder, and imperial patience. He demands tribute, and Israel splits into pro-Assyrian and anti-Assyrian camps, each convinced the other is leading the nation to ruin. Sound familiar? The argument over whether to buy safety with submission or risk everything on resistance is one of history's oldest political fractures. Kings rise and fall by assassination as policy swings back and forth. Then tribute stops again, and Assyria invades in force. Everyone expects Israel to fold. Israel does not fold. The source insists that what follows is underrated by historians. Assyria, a giant empire, needs 10 years and 3 kings to finish off this small kingdom. Israel inflicts bitter defeats, resists far longer than expected, and turns what should have been a simple conquest into a drawn-out humiliation for the superpower. Finally, in 722 BC, Sargon II captures Samaria, and because he knows what kind of opponent he has faced, he takes no chances. He deports the entire population, and the kingdom of Israel is over. Then the camera swings south to Judah, where the Davidic line still rules, though the throne is hardly secure. Judah fights Egyptians, Phoenicians, Arabians, Philistines, Moabites, and Syrians, gaining and losing ground in a century of expansion and contraction. And yes, Judah gets its own dark palace drama. Athaliah, daughter of Jezebel, seizes the throne after the murder of her son Ahaziah and tries to annihilate the royal line. But one infant prince, Jehoash, is hidden away. It is the kind of story that feels written for television, except it is already ancient. After 6 years, Athaliah is overthrown, Jehoash is crowned at 7, and the Davidic line is restored. For a moment, it looks as if stability might finally breathe again. Then Assyria returns to history with full force. This time, Judah, listening to Isaiah, avoids entangling alliances and pays tribute. Isaiah's instinct is restraint, because he knows panic can make a small nation run straight into a larger trap. But after Israel falls, Judah begins to tear itself apart with the same argument: submit to Assyria or resist with Egypt and Syria. Eventually, the pro-Egyptian faction wins and builds a north-south axis against Assyria. It collapses almost instantly. Syria and Egypt back away under pressure, and Judah stands alone before the enraged Assyrian war machine. Then comes one of the most dramatic moments in the whole narrative. The besieging Assyrians outside Jerusalem suddenly break camp and leave. The Jews celebrate a sign from heaven. Herodotus offers a different explanation involving plague. The source invites you to choose, but either way, the fact remains that Judah is saved. The king resumes tribute, perhaps hoping heaven may once again solve what human strategy cannot. Soon enough, Assyria collapses under Babylonian assault. Nineveh falls in 612 BC, and at Carchemish in 605 BC, Babylon destroys the remaining Assyrian forces. But Judah does not inherit freedom. It inherits a new master. Babylonia takes over the empire, and with it, Judah. Here comes the climax. Judah reacts to Babylon the way Israel reacted to Assyria, not with comfortable submission, but with rebellion. After a few years under Babylonian rule, Judah rises in 600 BC. Nebuchadnezzar sends irregulars to crush the revolt, and to his surprise, they are beaten back. So he comes himself and discovers the same thing others learned before him. The Jews are dangerous when cornered. Jerusalem falls in 597 BC. King Jehoiachin is taken captive, and 8,000 leading citizens are deported, but the city is not yet destroyed. Zedekiah, only 21, is installed as a puppet king. That should have ended it. It does not. Anti-Babylonian plotting starts almost as soon as the armies withdraw. Judah aligns with Egypt and reaches again for independence. Nebuchadnezzar returns in fury. Egypt crumbles in weeks. Judah holds out for a year and a half. Then, in 586 BC, after a 6-month siege, the walls are breached. Zedekiah watches his sons killed, then loses his sight. The temple is destroyed. Jerusalem is looted and reduced to rubble. Most of the population is deported to Babylonia. If this were the end, it would already be devastating. But the story still has one final act of defiance. The Babylonians leave behind the poor, the sick, and the crippled, perhaps assuming they are no threat. That assumption proves fatal. The governor is killed, the garrison at Mizpah is slaughtered, and Babylon must march the road to Jerusalem a third time. This last rebellion is not really about victory anymore. After 3 wars and 3 defeats, the kingdom of Judah is finished, 136 years after the fall of Israel. And that is the haunting power of this chapter of Jewish history. The wonder is not simply that Israel and Judah were conquered. Almost every small kingdom near empire eventually is. The wonder is how long they resisted, how fiercely they tied political survival to covenant, law, memory, and the Jewish God, and how even defeat did not erase the identity they were fighting to preserve. Because beneath all the battles, assassinations, rebellions, and ruins runs one relentless idea. In this tradition, God is not absorbed into the state. The king is not divined. Power is judged. Morality matters. Idolatry is not just bad theology. It is national self-destruction. So here is the final thought. What keeps a people alive when armies burn their capital, topple their kings, and carry them into exile? Maybe it is land. Maybe it is memory. Or maybe it is the terrifying, stubborn belief that history itself answers to something higher than empire. If this story stayed with you, like the story, and subscribe for the next episodes about Jewish history and Jewish God.